Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Cars and Fuel, a podcast where we talk about cars and we also eat delicious food. So with that, Andrew, what are we eating today?
Well, today we've got some bagel sandwiches from Hidden Bagels. Lewis is over here in Spokane visiting, so yep, that's what we got.
It's something a little bit different. Maybe we can show
What'd you order?
Oh, I got the salmon bagel with rosemary and salt, I think is what that is. The camera will focus on that.
I got the lox bagel as well, and I think it's on a sesame. It's gonna be nice and messy, so I'm gonna lay out some napkins.
Yeah, excellent. While you're doing that, I'll kind of intro. Today what we're gonna be talking about is, I guess, buying cars. As a lot of people know, if you are in the market for a new car right now or even a used car, you may have noticed that prices have kind of grown exponentially during this time, during the pandemic, and it's been a flurry of different factors, whether it be supply chain issues, whether it be because of production delays due to COVID and all that stuff. There's
dealer markups.
Dealer markups. Oh man, we're going to talk about all
resale.
that today. Resale. And so, I think Andrew got this idea from an article that he read talking about the average price of a new car right now, and how much has that gone up to?
It was like $48,000.
$48,000 average new. I don't know.
Which just a few years back it was around $36,000, I think.
Yeah. Well, actually, 35, because Tesla wanted to come out with the Model 3 at $35,000 because it's the average price of a new car, and now it's 48, which is crazy. I mean, to put it into perspective, I'm thinking about getting the GR Corolla, which I'm on the wait list for. And that is about, the configuration I want is like 45 or something like that. And to me, that's a lot of money for a car. Like that for me is like, I'm stretching, to be able to figure out.
And that's assuming you could get that at MSRP. Right?
Exactly. That's before dealer markup. So yeah, I think, did you want to start? Do you want me to start? Whoever wants to eat first?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think we were going to talk about, just the price of a new car, all the variable feature or, variables that go in, but then also all these new added cost things like subscriptions and whatnot, things that didn't exist, a few years ago.
I'll start then, and you can eat while I'm starting the introduction.
We'll alternate here.
Yeah, we'll alternate.
We'll take bites.
So I think the easiest way to put this into perspective is our first car. And my very first car was a 1999 Subaru Outback that my parents got me. And the reason why they even got me a car in the first place is because I was taking auto tech the following year in high school. So I think this was around junior year when I got this car, junior year of high school. And I got this car because I needed to go to a different high school in order to take the auto tech program. So I needed a car to commute between schools and whatnot. I couldn't just be dropped off, in the morning at school or take the bus or whatnot. I needed to have a car to go between these two schools during the school day. And so we got this 1999 Outback. So this was back in 2011. So if you think about it, 1999, 2011, roughly, that's a 12-year-old car at that point. We got it with 153,000 miles. It was my first car. It was really exciting. It was a manual as well, which I was very particular about, and wanted to make sure that my first car was a manual so I could get as much time to practice driving manual as much as possible. And I believe out the door, that car cost my dad about $6,500 or so. And so back in 2011, $6,500 could give me a pretty reliable piece of transportation. It was a very clean car. It was actually a one-owner car. That Outback was serviced at that dealership all its life. And then I believe they traded it in for another Outback. So it was a very, very tidy Outback. Never been in any accidents or anything like that. I really enjoyed that car. It was totaled a couple of years later, unfortunately, because someone backed into it. So that was a bummer. But $6,500 could get me a reliable piece of transportation from school.
And mine's a similar story. You can go ahead and start eating yours there. 07, first vehicle was a 1998 Subaru Legacy GT. And about 120,000 miles. I got it for $4,500 cash. And I remember paying them cash and driving away. And
maybe.
And
anything wrong with it when you bought it,
nothing,
or was it
nothing
a very
wrong
clean
with it?
car?
I mean, paint was a little faded. It was in Florida, so it was a red vehicle. Paint was a little faded. Ended up repainting it blue. That's a whole other story. A very, very cheap paint job on it, but yeah. So both of us were able to get around 10-year-old vehicles, give or take, for around the $5,000 to $6,000 ballpark. Yep. Now fast forward, obviously that was more than a decade ago. But even with inflation now, what can you buy used for under $10,000 now?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I looked this morning at a 2011 Outback, which would equate to about a 12-year-old car today, right? So that's the equivalent time difference now, right? So I'm looking at a 2011 Outback with similar miles as what I bought my car back in the day. That car is going for about $13,000 now. You know, so to get an equivalent vehicle to what I bought about 10 years ago, price on that has basically doubled. You know, and if I were to cut my budget down to $5,000 mark, there's not a lot of good stuff at the $5,000 mark. In fact, what was $5,000 about 10 years ago is still $5,000 for that exact same car. You know, you're looking at like almost 20-year-old cars now.
Sure,
that cost $5,000, and a 20-year-old car, reliability-wise, is not the same as a 10-year-old car.
And, you know, safety features, whatnot, things advance so quickly, right?
Completely different vehicle, yeah.
It's kind of funny, you know, thinking back, when people buy their kids a first car, or when their kids go get a first car, they always try to buy like an old, cheap vehicle, but really, you know, it's kind of known that because of all the safety features and advancements, you almost want your kid to be in a newer, cheap vehicle than an older, used vehicle. It's that misnomer that, you know, the older vehicles are more reliable because they're built sturdier and whatnot. It's like, yeah, but we've come so much with frontal crash safety and side crash safety. And anyway.
It's really been kind of frustrating because I remember in college, high school, you know, almost 10 years ago now, I was hoping to buy like a WRX wagon at the time, you know, but as a kid, I couldn't afford a $5-6 grand car, like, you know, from my own money. You know, I didn't have like a full-time job or anything like that. And so I always dreamed one day, you know, I'll be able to afford a Bug-Eye WRX wagon or even like a Hawkeye WRX wagon, you know, which at the time, again, was like almost a 10-year-old car. And now they're almost 20-year-old cars. And the cost of them hasn't gone down. They're the exact same cost. They're still $5 grand, except they're an even older car now. And they have even more mileage, and yet they still cost the same as they did 10 years ago, which is crazy. And so like the value proposition is just like, why would I, you know, knowing that car was $5 grand 10 years ago, why would I pay $5 grand now for that same car?
It's absurd.
You know, and you know, when I was going through that whole phase of like buying different cars, like fun cars, you know, to take wear and tear off the BRZ, and I looked at normal cars too. I looked at, you know, non-turbocharged enthusiast cars. I looked at things like a Corolla and stuff. And those, like, you know, a 15-year-old, 20-year-old Corolla is still going for like $6,000-$7,000. Like, why? Like, that's supposed to be like a $2 grand car that I could pick up, you know, for fun, you know.
So I think what was interesting in that Jalopnik article was they were talking about new cars.
Yeah.
And you know, the average price of the car's gone up, and obviously we explained, you know, some of the reasons why, you know, post-COVID, supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the interesting points they brought up was also that the type of cars have changed, right? So you used to be able to go out and get a cheap sedan, entry-level sedan, right?
Okay.
Your Corolla sedan, your Nissan Versa sedan, you know, very cheap 2 Series Mazda, whatnot. Those cars are all disappearing, right? The move towards crossovers, the move towards bigger SUVs and whatnot has shifted the averages up. And so part of the reason why the average cost of a car's gone up is because the cars people are buying are trucks and SUVs, which are inherently more expensive. And on the low end, there's fewer options for econobox sedans, hatchbacks. Because, you know, even look at like Toyota, they're replacing the Corolla with the Corolla Cross, right? And that carries a premium because it's now a hatchback, or it's a crossover, even though it's a lifted hatchback.
Yep.
So that's kind of interesting, is that just the types of cars people are buying are changing, and that's also affecting the average cost of the vehicle. I still think Nissan makes a Versa, do they? The sedan? And I think that might still be the cheapest new car you can buy in the... I think it's, in fact, the only, and I might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the only car under $20,000 MSRP sticker.
Yep, unless Mitsubishi still makes the Mirage.
I don't think they do, though.
I don't think they do, because it's too cheap.
Because they've moved towards, like, the crossover things, right? The Eclipse Cross, whatever, the Outlander Cross.
Yeah, I think about, like, you know what's funny is I know you had a Scion TC when you were in college. My dream car when I was in middle school for, like, my first car, like, when I finally got my license, was going to be a Scion TC. And I looked at used ones when I was a kid in high school, and I looked at new ones, and like a Scion TC, which was like a really great like first car for a teenager, right? Because it's reasonably safe, it's kind of stylish, it has a freaking panoramic sunroof, it's got great fuel economy, blah blah blah. That was like an $18,000 car, I think, brand new.
I paid $14,500 for mine, but mine was a little tuned.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, if you have pictures, I hope you add that to the B-roll here. Didn't that thing deafen you when you were driving home from school?
No cat.
But yeah, I really want a Scion TC. I think about how that was an $18,000 car. I think about recently how I helped a friend buy a Corolla hatchback. She wanted a hatchback car, and she settled on the Corolla hatch. And she had to get the XSE, which is a higher trim one.
It's like the sport trim, right?
The sportier trim one with the 18-inch wheels, in order to get the blind spot monitoring system. That was the only way to get that trim. But even then, like fully loaded Corolla back in the day, right? If you got like the S trim or whatnot, was like what, $17,000, $18,000 car, maybe $20,000. her car was like 25, 26 or something. So that's like 28, 29 after tax. This is for a standard Corolla hatchback, by the way, right? Like this is not the GR Corolla. This is just a regular Corolla hatchback. Is like a high 20s car.
That's
like,
crazy.
That's absolutely crazy, right? And you know, even if you got like the base Corolla sedan, I think that starts like 22 or something like that. Never did I think that a Corolla would be like a, you know, low 20s car starting.
And that's before you
price,
factor in the feature creep, right? It's like, oh, you want this feature, you want this feature. Well, now you got to jump trim levels.
Yeah, right.
Like the base trims of most of these cars now are so bare bones.
They are.
know?
I mean, they have Bluetooth and they have a backup camera.
Because they're required, basically.
They also do have, Toyota does have like the standard forward collision avoidance, which we won't talk about.
If you want anything, you know, anything better than the basic textile seats or,
if you want
cardboard door.
alloys, right? These cars still have steel rims at $22,000, which is, for a Corolla, you just think back in the day, you know, low 20s was like Camry money, right? And now Camrys are like starting at like high 20s, like low 30s type of thing. If you want anything with decent spec on it, it's just wow, like, like imagine, right? But yet, as everyone's been talking about, you know, wages haven't gone up or anything like that. Like, you know, cost of housing is also going up too, right? So it's just, you know, cost of living is just going up. So on top of people complaining about rent going up and like more housing price going up, car prices have gone up too. And that's, you know, those are the two most expensive things that people spend money on in their lifetime, right?
Well, and that's before you take into account all the other factors and variables or cost of ownership, right? So your insurance, your gas, heck, even your electricity. If you drive any electric car, you know, electric rates are going up.
Cost of service too, like oil changes also.
Service is going up. And what's interesting is in that Jalopnik article, again, I think they were saying like people are being priced out of new vehicles. You know, the average person can't afford to buy a new vehicle.
Right.
So that means they're going to either hold on to their current vehicle longer, or and when they do need one, they're going to be forced to the used market. And the used market, as we discussed, is just upside down.
Right.
Yeah. The prices on these vehicles used are just insane. And I think because there's more pack, you know, dealerships make more money on a used vehicle than a new vehicle, so of course they're gonna.
But it's obviously connected, right? If the price of a new item goes up, obviously the price of a used one's going to go up because those people are going to try to save a buck and then go towards the used market. But then there's more people looking for used cars, that will go up in value. I mean, I think about like my BRZ is a 2016, which I bought in 2018, just over 5 years ago. In May now.
You just paid it off.
And I just paid it off. I paid it off a year early, and the price of that actual car was $21,900. Now I worked at CarMax at the time, which is why it was a little bit cheaper. But I bought that thing 2 years old, and it had 7,000 miles on it, which was incredibly low. But I paid $21,900 for it, was the actual price of the car before taxes. The car now has 46,000 miles on it. A 2016 BRZ with 46,000 miles is either the same as either 21,900 or actually a little bit more than 21,900. So my car has actually stayed the same value, even though I've added 40,000 miles on it, which is absolutely crazy, right? Like, why would I? It's just, oh man.
Well, it's like my 2017 Honda Civic hatchback.
Yep.
Car I had before this one.
Yeah.
I bought for $23,000 in 2017. I sold it in 2021, so 4 years later, for $19,500. That's crazy. That depreciation. I mean, it had about 40,000 miles on it, so pretty low mileage, but $19,500 for 4 years?
The $19,500 value, I believe, is also what you were quoted 2 years prior to that when you were thinking about trading in the Civic too.
So it
and
held
2 years later, 2 years later, it's worth the same amount.
And I probably got the last good deal in the world on a vehicle because I leased this Kona EV for $218 a month with a $15,000 a year, 15,000 mile a year lease. And my buyout on it here next year, I'm going to be buying it out, is $19,000. So all in, because they rolled in the federal tax credit and everything, I think all in, I'm going to be about $30,000 out of pocket to own this vehicle, which you can't even buy a new car for $30,000 now, let alone an electric or anything like that.
You can't lease a Kona nowadays for whatever you just said.
They're probably like $400 a month leases.
Yeah, of course.
It's crazy. So we know that new cars and used cars are a mess. We know the cost of ownership situation is crazy. Let's talk about dealer markup, because this is something interesting. You're constantly embattled in social media threads and comment threads.
I am.
Especially on enthusiast cars.
Yep.
Because people think you're poor.
Yep.
Because you don't want to pay 10, 15, 20,000 over list.
To give a little context about this, I'm involved with the two main groups that I have, Facebook groups I have these type of discussions with, are going to be the GR Corolla owners group, because there's a Facebook group of people that are like looking to buy GR Corolla. And it's full of people showing off that they bought a GR Corolla, sometimes at MSRP, But a lot of these groups are also filled with dealer posts, like some guy saying, hey, you know, our dealership's getting one in the Miami, Florida area. It's only 10 grand markup, you know, so hit me up, you know, I'm here. And it is just filled with people laughing. But it's also filled with people saying, oh, 10 grand, that's not a bad markup. And whenever you tell people that any type of markup is a bad markup, the first thing they do is they say that you can't afford it and you're poor and therefore you shouldn't be here. And I'm just like, there's a huge difference between what I can afford and what I'm willing to pay for.
Sure.
And the fact of the matter is, you know, I'm not a rich man, but I can afford, probably afford, you know, whatever some of these markups are. That doesn't mean I want to pay 10 grand extra on a car, right? That just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, whatever the manufacturer said it was supposed to sell for, and I have to pay an additional 10 grand privilege. I mean, basically, you're paying for exclusivity, right? You're paying for the bragging rights of being able to say, I got the car, you know, before all of you guys, right?
Right.
I don't find it to be worth 10 grand to be able to brag.
And again, you know, basic economic principles, supply and demand, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is that, and I guess this applies to everything that was in scarcity during the pandemic. You know, scalpers are going to flip things at a high cost and people are going to pay it. And some people are going to be like, you're stupid for doing that. You know, look at video game consoles, look at graphics cards. But eventually the prices will come down. Graphics cards have come down. Consoles are selling for less than what they cost MSRP. So the same is going to apply to cars. Eventually, people are going to just be done paying these markups, and they're going to have to lower the cost. Or the economy is going to crash, and no one will be buying cars anyway. And then, but it's so silly for people to come out and say, oh, you know, you can't afford it because you don't want to pay a markup.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, if a $1,000 iPhone is being sold at Apple and someone's flipping it for $1,500 and I choose not to pay the $500 markup, that doesn't make me poor.
Yeah.
That makes me actually pretty smart.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a fool with my money, you know? But for some reason in the car community, it's, I don't know, it's just...
If you can't afford the markup, then therefore it's because you're poor, you know? Like, you know, they always say like, oh, you know, instead of complaining that you don't want to pay the markup, just admit that you're poor. Like, those are not the same thing.
I'd rather take that markup money, put it in a high yield savings account, and then make money on the money, and that doesn't make me poor, I don't think.
I mean,
right?
a lot of people have financial literacy. I mean, and that speaking of financial literacy, the thing that people aren't thinking about too is, you know, you're financing these vehicles for the most part because intelligent people finance vehicles for the most part. You don't want your liquid asset locked in a car. But if you're financing a vehicle and you're financing it at 10 grand over MSRP, but then in about 6 months, a year time, like they're selling at MSRP or below, your price delta is much more significant, right? You're underwater on that car now, you know.
Well, and taking into account other things like insurance. Okay, let's say that car gets totaled. And now suddenly you're way upside down because they're gonna run a market value at the time of total loss, and it's gonna say, okay, well, you know, market value is dropped. Your $40,000 car is worth 20. Yeah. And MSRP was 30. Yeah. So now you're upside down 20, and you're gonna have to pay the or your lien holder, you know, unless you got gap insurance, which
it's crazy.
It's all added cost, right? It's the cost creep.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it's just hurting the ability for enthusiasts to get some of these vehicles. Yeah. I want that new Nissan Z. Yeah. I get it. It doesn't drive as good as the BRZ. It doesn't drive as good as the 86.
You want what you want.
But I want it. I sat in it at the Seattle Auto Show. I fell in love with that car. I want it. I love the retro design. Yep. I'm not going to pay $55,000, $60,000 for one. That's insane. No. You know, that's not at all.
Yeah. You don't want it that badly.
I don't want it that bad. 40 grand, sure. I'll wait used and get it for under 30. But, you know, if I have to wait a decade, so be it. I'm not going to rush out and do that. Yeah. And so... You know, it's just silly. And what's going to happen is you're just pricing out, you're preventing enthusiasts who would enjoy these vehicles and mod these vehicles from having these vehicles.
You know, to me, Andrew, I think that's the other problem with the whole markup situation too, is it's filled with people that are also buying these cars hoping to flip it for that markup, right? So like they want to they're taking advantage of like a dealership that is selling at MSRP, and then they're now taking advantage of the market to sell it at 10 grand over so they can make a quick buck, rather than just enjoying the vehicle. You know, and so it's just, you're right.
I mean, it happens every time there's a pre-order on a new electric car, right? Ford Lightning, the Hummer, you know,
Rivian,
As soon as the first wave of deliveries hit, everyone's flipping them for over list. Yeah. And so it's like, are you actually getting these cars to people who want to use them, who are going to use them, or are you just flipping them all day long?
It was the same problem with GPUs too. It kept on getting bought up by like people that were mining with it. They weren't actually using it for gaming as intended, you know, and so...
And so from a manufacturer standpoint, they don't care because they've got paid.
Yeah.
They get the money no matter what.
Well,
but really, what does that do to your brand?
But that's why NVIDIA was so clever. It was they started basically making these GPUs bad at mining, so they could basically slowly start to weed out the miners and whatnot. So they actually did care who got it. They were trying really hard to make sure that like actual gamers got these graphics cards. But I think that's the problem with like cars in the U.S. anyways, is because the manufacturer can say all they want about the MSRP, the manufacturer suggested price, but the dealership can do whatever they want. They can sell it for 500, they can sell it for 5 over.
And that's interesting too. With high demand cars like the Ford Mach-E and the Lightning, Ford was trying to restrict dealers from doing that, and so they would. You're right. They can't set the price because the dealer agreements allow the dealership to set the price.
Yep.
But what they would do is change their stock allotment. So they say, if we catch you doing these absurd markups, you're going to get fewer inventory units, next quarter. And so
GM was doing it with the Corvettes too, right?
That effectively punishes. Well, they went a step further and said like the buyer can't resell it. Now, I don't know the legality of that. I'm not a lawyer. That seems a little murky at best. I don't think you can tell someone they can't resell a vehicle they own, but
the fact they were trying to do something about it, right?
Now it's interesting, because all these, I feel like every one of these conversations eventually comes back to Tesla, but Tesla seems to be bucking the trend. Because this year they've had, 3, 4, 5, I can't keep track how many price drops.
Every other week I get a news article about like
a Tesla price drop. And so what's really interesting about that, it's twofold. One, you have a lot of probably angry Tesla owners that are bought in for way too much.
Yep.
You have the flippers that were trying to flip at the start of the year that are now upside down, which will shed a tear for them.
Yeah.
But also it's forcing some in the industry to react and some to not.
Yeah.
Ford's reacting. They dropped the price of the Mach-E, I think, twice. My mom's got one on order, and it's now like almost 5,000 or 6,000 lower than when she bought it.
It's been delayed because it keeps getting cheaper.
Pretty much. And so some are trying to compete. Others are saying we're not going to go in a price war with Tesla. I think Volkswagen mentioned, they believe their product is quality enough and will stand on their own that they're not going to compete with price.
It's not, but that's a different video.
Right. Well, and so what's interesting is, to a point you can't compete with Tesla's price drops because they're just going to raise them the next month anyway, or the next week. They fluctuate so much, you'd be foolish to try to fight them on price, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. We could discuss whether there's a demand issue they have or whatnot, or too much supply. But they do seem to be the only one that's actively drawing down the prices. But that's only after they drove them up, because the Model Y at the start of this year and the end of last year, I think it was up like 20,000 over where it first launched.
That's true.
So they're dropping the price because they raised them up so much.
That's true. But it seems like it was a accurate representation of supply chain issues, right? Like when they were struggling to get batteries or chips for their infotainment screen and stuff, they were like, well, we can't build as many cars, let's up the price, right? Naturally, that's what you would do. And so, they're adjusting in real time. And again, with Tesla, they have a lot more control, right? Because they sell directly to consumers. But it's
a lot more control, but it's funny because it kind of shoots the argument that direct sales guarantee a set price in the flip. Because, Because if I bought this week for X dollars and next week it drops by 15,000, that's almost worse than a dealership. Where at least the dealership you can haggle and negotiate and get a deal, and they're not going to drop the price 15 grand on you next week.
Yeah.
So that's I think where a lot of people get burned. I think in China they were having protests and people were like, jumping on cars and getting crazy about it because they felt they were so ripped off.
You buy a car and immediately, a week later, not even a year later, right? A week later, MSRP drops 10 grand. Your car immediately dropped 10 grand in value, like on top of whatever the standard
depreciation, right?
Yeah, so it's tough. I think it's especially. It was a problem during the pandemic when a Hyundai Elantra base had a 5 grand markup. People were doing crap like that. We weren't even talking about like N-line cars or like the Veloster N and stuff. Like the standard, basic cars were having markups, which is absolutely crazy.
And that will chalk up to supply because dealerships were like empty.
Yeah. But nowadays it's like enthusiast cars are still having some markups, and people think, oh, there's nothing you can do about it. You can do something about it by not giving the dealership money for that, right? Like if everyone doesn't give them, we're not rewarding bad behavior, basically, right? If you stop paying for it, they're going to stop thinking they can get away with it.
Exactly, and that's the tough thing is, and with all these in-demand items, tech, cars, what have you, that's what drives it. Is they're only able to do that because someone's willing to pay that, and then that person's going to go defend themselves in a forum and say, actually, they can afford it, so what does it matter? If I can afford it, I'll pay whatever. It's like, well, where is the sky the limit? At what point? Is 2 times markup too much for a Nissan Z? Would you pay 70,000 for it?
It is, but 911 GT3s and stuff and RSs were going for 2 times MSRP.
And selling.
Yeah, and selling, which was, and I don't even think that's like, someone reselling. That's actually from the dealership. They're doing like 100 grand, 200 grand markup and selling. Like, it's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
So we know that dealer markups are a thing. We know that people are paying over list. We know that the used market's a mess. And now on top of all of that, you've got OEMs, auto manufacturers, adding new profit avenues. So let's talk a little bit about subscriptions and the rise of subscriptions in the auto industry.
You're very passionate about that.
I am very passionate about it.
Take it away, Andrew.
I'm in a car right now that's technically got subscriptions.
Does it?
There's 3 different subscriptions. There's a subscription for the remote start. So the app has a remote start so that I can, precondition my car. There's a remote charge subscription so that I can remote start and stop the charge on my car. And then there's a remote navigation subscription. Well, I don't have the built-in nav, so that's not an option for me. So right now I'm subscribed to 2 of the 3.
Okay.
But because it's free, they give you the first 3 years free.
Sure.
After that, they want, I think it's like $100 a year.
Yeah.
For the luxury to be able to remote start my car from an app.
Yeah.
What's annoying is the model year after mine, they put the remote start on the key fob, so you can still do that.
Yep.
That's annoying because that's all I really want, to be able to just use a key fob and remote start. I don't need an app that never works and is always down.
I have two tidbits before you continue, which is one, I'm surprised that they don't package those 2 things together.
No, they split them up. They make you pay 2 different subscriptions.
That's insane. The other thing too is I kind of understand that because it relies on their service, right? So they can't make it free forever, right? So they have to pay someone.
So I kind of get that,
Yep.
and that's where I was gonna go with that is, okay, yes, you need an LTE modem. Someone's got to pay for that data. I understand it. It's a complete racket, $100 a year, but I kind of get that. But now we're seeing subscriptions for hardware, for things that are already in the car that cost no extra money.
Yes.
BMW wants you to subscribe for performance. I think it's Mercedes and BMW both now have subscriptions for performance. So to unlock additional performance in your vehicle, and
that exists.
And these are mostly on electric vehicles, but they're also doing it on gas cars too. You have to pay an annual subscription to unlock the full horsepower. I know Audi has been getting in tons of hot water for all their climate control subscriptions, right? You want access to, what was it, the heated seats? Or
The 3-zone climate control.
3-zone climate control, something that's already built into the car. It's already there.
There's literally a button, but in some countries, if you press that button and you didn't pay for the subscription, not even pay for the feature, but pay for the subscription, it'll tell you that you haven't paid for the subscription, even though you have the physical button to activate the feature.
It's crazy. And so, are people actually doing them? Are people actually subscribing to these things? What do you think?
Well, people are. That's the problem. They have no choice in the moment, right? If I want the feature of heated seats, I gotta pay for it, right?
But at what point are you, when you're car shopping, you say, you know what? These are paywalled features. I'm gonna pass on this vehicle.
I would, out of principle, absolutely. This whole thing started with BMW's heated seat subscription in South Korea, I think. It was like very regional specific. And then it was like, BMW USA was like, we might consider doing something like that. And the internet went into flames. The angry mobs broke out their pitchforks and everything. They were not having it in the U.S. Like if BMW USA tried to pull something like that off, like the coders would go to town, like trying to unlock this.
But now they're all kind of getting away with it. I think they're testing the waters to see how much they can get away with it. And so far, it doesn't seem like there's been a big enough backlash. And we always have to kind of frame this in the point of like enthusiasts versus the average person.
Yep.
So the average person going into a BMW dealership and buying the new fancy 3 Series or 5 Series, or let's not kid ourselves, probably the X5. Or, are they going to say, you know what, I have to pay monthly or annually for this. I don't want this car.
No, unfortunately not. The average consumer, which is a lot more people than us enthusiasts, are going to say, well, it's time for my new X5. My lease is up. I'm trying to get another one. I'm going to get another one. Oh, I have to pay heated seats this time? Oh, that kind of sucks, but it is what it is. And life will move on for them, right? And I'm glad you are bringing up the fact that there is a difference between enthusiast consumers like ourselves versus the general consumer, because that is a very important part. And so we, here on Clutch K, we always want to make sure we don't try to get stuck in our own little bubble. We don't want to have an echo chamber here. We always want to think about it from both sides. And the reality is this: the general consumer is a lot more accepting of these types of changes. They're not understanding that, like, you can rebel almost by not purchasing it. I think back to our Mark 8 GTI video from the Seattle Auto Show. I think that was one of our highest viewed clips. And it got some of the most dislikes because people were really upset with me for me calling out Volkswagen and their crazy touch, interface and whatnot.
You're just gonna get used to it. You'll get used to it real quick.
Well, not only that, I got called the poor thing. They're like, oh, it sounds like another Mark 7 owner that can't afford a Mark 8. I can afford a Mark 8. I'm just choosing not to because my Mark 7 was better in every single way in the interior, right? And I think I mentioned in that video too, very quietly, after we kind of finished the main bits too, is, we as enthusiasts find a lot of these things annoying, but yet the general consumer, when they're at the auto show, when they're at the dealership seeing these cars for the very first time,
they see that beautiful touchscreen.
They
see no buttons.
Yeah, they think, oh, it's so futuristic.
We saw it firsthand. We were just standing as we're ribbing on the vehicle. Half a dozen people went through talking about how cool that was.
Yep. Exactly, and they don't have the foresight to think about how annoying those systems are going to be in a couple of years. If you're cold, if your hands are gross like they are right now, like I won't be able to operate like some of those touch strips. And that's
the fact that they're not backlit, which I think they finally made them backlit.
That's a whole other thing too. But also like because it's so integrated into the infotainment system, if that infotainment system lags, it's just going to get worse and worse. I mean, even in your car, for example, right? You have dedicated climate control knobs here,
but you have to see it on the screen.
You have to see it on the screen, and if that screen isn't working, the AC is probably not working either. So even though you have physical climate control, they're so tied into the rest of the system.
Sure.
It's things like that. People don't have the foresight to think that like, oh, this is actually going to become a gimmick in about a month's time that I'm going to get annoyed about.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, and
it's classic cost cutting. It's cheaper to install touchscreen than it is physical knobs and buttons.
And I just hate the reasoning of you'll get used to it. That's not a reason.
You shouldn't have to get used to something that's supposed to be better. Right?
Yeah.
For the longest time in tech, the phones got better, computers got better every year, and it was without a doubt faster processor, more RAM, better cameras,
easier to use.
Now that they've kind of plateaued, they start pulling features back. Look at Apple; they removed the Force Touch, right? They're actually removing features from their devices. But people are like, oh, you'll just get used to it; it's fine. Or we didn't really care about that feature in the first place. Yeah, you don't care until it's gone, right? Oh, it's just a knob, it's just a button. Until there is no knob and button, and it's minus 15 out, and you've got gloves on, and you're quickly trying to turn your heat on, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I think and with the subscriptions, going back to that, I think what's kind of nefarious is a lot of times they're rolling them into the financing. And this is where the financing is just where everything goes, everything goes to be hidden. And you're looking at that one monthly payment, and it's like, okay, it's just all part of my monthly payment. Well, sure, yeah, but you break it up. How much in that financing are you paying for your remote start subscription, for your heated seats, for your performance upgrade, right? And at what point do you just set that as the price of the vehicle? And if you want that feature, you pay an extra $500 or $1,000 for it. I don't know.
Over the lifetime of the loan or whatever. Yeah. I mean, and that's the problem with American consumerism, right? Whenever it's broken down as a monthly payment, it's no longer as painful, and therefore we don't care about it anymore.
Right. And so I think.
Oh man.
And everyone's doing it. Everyone's wants a piece of that.
They're doing it because they can, right? It goes back to what we were saying. Like, if people simply stopped buying products that had these subscription services, they would quit immediately, right? Like, but they can. They get away with it, and so therefore it's just gonna get worse.
We touched on this earlier, but a car's the second most expensive purchase for most people. Your home's number one.
Right.
Your car's number two.
Right.
And so it's already the second most expensive thing you're gonna buy in your life. How much more expensive can they make it? Do they need to make it?
Yeah.
Is it just greed? I mean, at a certain point, the greed's got to play into it somewhere.
I wonder, because you said that some of these subscription services or features was very prominent on electric vehicles. I wonder if they're trying to make more money on the back end because they know that it's not going to come back on service. Right?
Yeah.
Especially for like a dealership. A majority of the dealership's money income isn't from selling vehicles. It's from the service department. And so now when you're buying, that's why GM or Chevy dealerships were trying to like tell people not to buy Bolts, because they wouldn't be able to get any more money out of that car after the purchase.
And you know what's funny about that is, that's kind of a whole holistic shift from every angle, because states and municipalities, they're losing the gas tax, right? So every state's trying to figure out how to counter that, to keep the roads built and all the infrastructure. Our state, Washington, they have one of the highest EV registration fees if not the highest, one of the highest in the country.
How much is it per year now?
$250 a year.
Wow.
Additional on top of your registration for owning an electric vehicle. Argument being, well, you're not paying that gas tax, and because the state has no state income tax, most of their revenue comes from things like the gas tax, right? That's why gas is so high up here.
I wonder if my gas tax that I pay per year is about $250. Do you think?
And so that's where there's a lot of dispute, because like I don't drive a lot right now. I've got 12,700 miles on this car. It's a little over 2 years old.
Yeah.
So that's what, 6,000 a year.
Yeah, you're very low.
Very low mileage. If you convert that to gas, I'm not paying $250 in gas tax a year driving 6,000
But if you
miles.
were a heavy mileage user, then yes, that you would be in the up if you bought an EV.
Right. But
Yeah.
but is that fair? Should
Yeah.
there be a use tax?
Yeah.
Should they tax you based on the mileage that
Yeah,
you
do you have
drive?
to, should you then have to report your EV's odometer every single year so they
Right.
can calculate how much you've been using?
But yeah, and so I think some of it is OEMs realizing as we make this big switch to electric, yeah, there's less room for oil changes and the gotchas when you take it in for service and they do that fuel system cleaner for $400 at Audi and they pour the STP in the tank and it's like, yep, that cost you $300. Can't do that in the electric, right?
Yeah.
Every time I bring mine to Hyundai, they joke, it's like, oh, you're here for an oil change. It's like, no, I'm here for a warranty claim, which they get paid on, but they don't get that nice fluff that they get to make on the gas Kona. So it's interesting. Part of that could be, I think also services, as they call them in general. Every company's going towards a more service-driven, like subscription service-based
Right.
model. Look at Apple, right?
Yep, exactly.
They're now starting to charge subscriptions for their software, which for the longest time has been free or paid use. The new Final Cut is now a subscription.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think they can realize they can get away with it, but I think there is a point that's too far. If you look at the streaming services, it used to be cable was $100 a month to have cable, and it's like, oh, it's only $7 a month for Netflix and $8 a month for Disney, and et cetera. But now these services are getting so expensive; they're actually more than cable. If you got all the streaming services and combined them, it'd be more than a cable.
Well, that's
bill.
the problem. Is there's so many streaming services now, right? That it all adds up, and it's,
And I think people are starting to just put the brakes on that and say, you know what, that's too much. I'm going to pare back some of these subscriptions.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be foolish to push hard on cars when you're already looking at a high monthly payment for financing or leasing. You're looking at high insurance, high gases or electric, and now you want to charge me $100 a year for acceleration, another $100 a year for heated seats.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Man, and what's kind of sad though is because of these subscription services, it will allow people to afford these cars that are now more expensive. Do you know what I'm saying?
Elaborate on that. I'm not sure I follow you
I
there.
guess I guess over time, as it gets more and more expensive, they could then start lowering the price of the car, because then instead of convincing you to pay $1,000, $2,000 more to get the package with sunroof or heated seats or whatnot, they can lower the price down, advertise a lower price, and then get you on the other end by saying, hey, look, and tempt you, right? Because they're like, hey, look at the heated seat button you have here. If you just simply give us $10 a month, we'll be able to unlock that feature for you, right? I think that's their workaround for jacking
You know
up
what's
the prices.
interesting? I think it guarantees the money on a used sale that they wouldn't normally get.
Oh, good point.
Because if I buy let's say I buy an X5, BMW gets that initial sale.
That's a good
But they
point.
don't get any money on the used sales. But now, when a new owner gets the vehicle, they're locked out of these features. They have to pay money to BMW to access them. So BMW continues to get a revenue stream on a second, third, fourth owner.
Gotcha.
Which, that's kind of interesting, Not great, but it guarantees them revenue on used vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, this, everything comes down to revenue nowadays, right? Like everything comes down to generating more money nowadays. I was talking with a coworker about how he loves buying like older refrigerators. Like he goes to if like a restaurant's closing down, he'll buy their old commercial refrigerator. Because for him, it doesn't matter that's a 10, 20-year-old model. Like they don't change. It's not like cars, right? But what he noticed is just like those restaurants want to upgrade to like the latest and greatest refrigerators and whatnot, or like commercial stoves and whatnot. And it's ironic because the newer stuff is actually far lower quality than the old stuff that he's buying.
Sure, that's been kind of universal across everything.
Yeah, which is why he's able to buy like a 10, 20-year-old item because he knows that's going to last anyways. And so I think there's been, as we've talked about for the past several episodes, like everything comes back to cost cutting, right? There's such a huge push in the industry right now for how inexpensive can we make something and how expensive can we get away with selling for something to keep that price difference, to pocket,
It's not sustainable though. Just exponential growth by definition cannot be sustained.
Sure.
Eventually we cannot pay $50,000 for a Toyota Corolla and $5,000 a year for subscriptions on it. That's insane, right?
Yep.
People are just going to go back to bicycles or take the bus.
GR Corollas, by the way, the Morizo edition, which is like limited to 1,200 units or 200 units or whatever it is. Some dealers are marking it up from 50 something, which is already expensive for a GR Corolla.
With the interior of a Corolla.
No, but it has the two seats removed, so it's lightened and stuff. But GR Corolla Morizo editions were listed for $100,000.
It's insane.
For a Corolla.
And is that bragging rights to to get one and be like, I paid double list for this.
I don't
It used to be you would brag, like, oh, I really got one over the car dealer. I went in and I
got an invoice.
I got a crazy bargain. I drove a hard bargain. Now is the bragging right? Like, man, they really took me. They took me for double list and I paid $100K. Like, I don't get it.
If someone walks up to me and said that they paid $100,000 or they paid double on markup on a car, I'm laughing their ass out of there.
No, and then they're gonna turn around and say you're poor.
I know, that's the problem, right? That's what it shifted to. Maybe it's a flex culture thing. I don't know.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, if you're any other final thoughts then before we close out?
I think we're just being grumpy about the
I
state
think
of
we might be grumpy old men, but we might actually be the voice of reason, I think, because we're millennials, we're not Gen Z. Just want to make that really clear. I don't have TikTok, you don't have TikTok. Clutch Kick isn't on TikTok. But I think we strike a interesting balance between we on our channel, we really want to try to speak to both sides of the market, right? We want to speak from the enthusiast market because we are enthusiasts through and through. I drive a very loud Subaru with a manual transmission, and I spend way too much money on cars. But we're also trying to be logical as well. We also want to be able to kind of see from the perspective of a business as well, which is why we talked about before in terms of building sports cars. In our super video, we kind of talked a little bit about how, at the end of the day, sports cars aren't as financially profitable, and so that's why they're not as prominent. We want to be able to look at it from both sides. We don't want to go into it with blinders on. But we want to hear your thoughts. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear what you think, what your experience has been. I've helped lots of people buy cars recently, and it's been really frustrating as someone that's a car enthusiast, kind of watching my friends having to go through this process of, paying a lot for what used to be like a really basic ar.
Has anyone hit you with the 84-month financing yet?
No, because I'm generally friends with people that are mostly financially responsible. So 84-month financing.
Just a quick aside, my dad was at the delership with getting his Buick serviced, and he was looking at the new vehicles on the lot. I think he was looking at a GMC Yukon truck or something. Yeah. And they drew up some numbers real quick for him. 84-month financing was their standard financing option to get that payment down. 84 months, that's longer than the warranty on that truck.
Yeah, well, they do that because again, the consumer thinks monthly, I can afford that.
And they don't show that interest rate.
No, of course not, because monthly. That's all they care about, right? It's all about short term. But we want to know your experiences. If you're watching on YouTube, please let us know your thoughts.
If you've recently overpaid for a vehicle, please let us know how much.
Please let us know how much. We'll keep your name anonymous. We just want to know what people are willing to pay for, right?
Sure.
We understand that there's also, it's really tough because there's certain situations like, let's say you total your car.
And you need a car.
Like, what are you gonna do if the jerks in your area are like overcharging you for a very basic car? It's tough. So we don't recommend paying markups. We never recommend paying markups. There's a bunch of great programs. Costco Auto Buying Program is usually a great program. But please let us know what your experience is. And if you have any questions or if you want any type of advice from car buying, please DM us at our Instagram, mine or Clutch Kick's Instagram. I'll put the what's it called? Handle?
The handle.
Is that what kids call it?
The ats.
The ats right here. And also clutchkickbusiness@gmail.com. We'll put that link right here. This is a great way to contact us. Love to talk cars with you guys and kind of walk through that journey with you because it does two things. We're here to help you to try to find the best value for you as possible, to help come to the best decision as possible. But we also want to know what our viewers are doing. We kind of want to see what that real experience is.
Sure.
Buying a new car, because I'm not buying a new car anytime soon. I'm number 29 or 39 for a GR Corolla, and the dealership that I ordered it from, they've had 4 so far, so it's going to be a while.
It'll be a while.
But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you next time. Take care.